Thanks, Neeraj, for setting the tone and inviting the panelists on behalf of me. But I once again warmly extend my gratitude and welcome the dear esteemed guests, my fellow participants and colleagues who are part of this event, the online participants who are probably listening to us over Zoom and YouTube. So I welcome all of you to this amazing session. So this is the opening session and we'll set context, just the way Neeraj told that how things are going to evolve over the next 8 days. I'll just briefly take 2 minutes to just set up the context, and then we can open up the session for discussion. We'll hear the perspectives each of the panel members has to offer on this topic on trends in the society and economy. Then we'll also have so it will be roughly around 40 minutes. And then after that, for 10 to 12 minutes, we'll have a Q&A session. So while the panelists speak, I would urge each of the participants here and online, if you can, put down your questions so that when the Q&A questions session come up, we'll be able to answer, if not all, at least some of the key questions that you would have. And then again, last 8 to 10 minutes to summarize and conclude the session. So we hope we'll be able to wind it up by 12-ish or so. So just to set the context of this session, so like Neeraj did mention in his introduction, and also it is not new that we understand that as a country we are at a crossroads of having the highest demographic dividend and also an aspiring 5 trillion economy. And at the same time we see that 67% of the population lies in the rural India, and obviously if we miss out on this opportunity, miss out or forget the rural in the India, then obviously this aspiration cannot be achieved. So how is it that there are trends, the trends in terms of technological advancements, there are trends, the societal shifts. There is a lot of aspiring youth population in these villages of the country. So how if it does possess a lot of opportunity and spaces for us to converge and build the 5 trillion economy that one has aspired for. But at the same time, one also has to understand that there are challenges and everything is not hunky-dory down there. So just to bring a reference, I was just looking up at the UNDP National Multidimensional Poverty Progress Review report, which was released last month only in July 2023. And the report is, it did mention that India has been able to achieve a remarkable progress. We saw the fastest decline in percentage of multidimensional poor in the rural areas from a starting 32.5% in the year 15-16 to around 19.28% in the year 1920-21. And states, particularly the central eastern states like Odisha, Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Rajasthan, they were the ones who had actually shown the steepest decline in the multidimensional poverty. But also at the same time, when we look at, as a country, we look at different states, and we compare, we see that the north, there's still huge disparity in terms of the northern and southern states as compared to these central eastern states of the country. So how can these disparities be reduced over the period of time? Because again, these central eastern states are those states which has the population among different states are compared. These are the states who have the highest population. Bihar, UP, for example, would have the highest population as compared to the northern and southern states of the country. So with this, I would. I'm really honored to have this distinguished experts panel and thought leader with us today. And while we embark this insightful journey, since Vivek could not join us today in person due to some last minute exigency, may I request the tech team to play a video. So Vivek, while the tech team puts up the video, we just told that Vivek has been at the forefront of technological innovations, and he has written many publications around how tech has played a major part in this society and how it is going to evolve over the next couple of years. So let's hear his thoughts on how tech can become more inclusive, particularly for the rural India, and help us reduce the rural and urban divide that exists in our country. Can we have Vivek's video, please?
Hi from Silicon Valley. In the next few minutes, I'm going to try to give you a perspective of how much the world has changed in terms of technology and what's become possible. And the good news is that innovation has now globalized. The poorest of the poor have access to the most advanced technologies as the rich do. Witness the fact that everyone, even in the villages now goes around with smartphones. Those smartphones are more powerful than the crazy supercomputers of the 1970s that had export controls to India. Everyone has those, which means that they now have access to the world's knowledge, and they also have access to a lot of other technologies which are going to transform India and the rest of the world. With that, let me walk you through some of these technologies. First of all, let's look at some of the things, some of the advances we're going to see in the next decade. We will have cars that drive themselves. Here in Silicon Valley, we already have cars on our highways, but they crash into each other. Tesla's technology in particular is highly imperfect. But give it a few more years and they'll start working. And they'll even work in many parts of India, believe it or not. And then we're going to have cars that fly. This may actually be the solution to India's traffic mess, is that you just fly from point A to point B. But they won't be cars, there'll be drones that do that. And those drones will be relatively inexpensive. They're coming, ready or not. And then drones delivering everything, rather than having all of these dunzo drivers and all of these food delivery drivers that you have clogging up the roads, we'll have drones that do all of that. Robotic housekeepers. This is not a big deal in India, but here in Silicon Valley, I have to wash my own clothes. I have to, clean up everything myself. You don't want robotic housekeepers in India so you can preserve employment, but in places like where I am, we need them, and they're coming. We'll also have robotic friends and companions. This is one of the good things about India, that even especially in the villages, that you have companionship. You always have people looking after each other. In the West, it's sheer loneliness. People are sitting in their apartments all day and night, and they have no one to talk to. Well, soon they're going to have AI assistants helping them. And then AI doctors. This is going to be wonderful for rural India, because the same advances that we're going to see over here in the West with our smartphones being able to monitor our health and advise us, they'll be available to the poorest of the poor in India at the same time they're available. They're coming in the next few years. And then cures for all diseases, including cancer. On the stage, hopefully you have one of my dearest friends and someone I look up to, Venkataramanan. The work he's doing with Karkinos healthcare is the most advanced in the world. I'm working with him and pushing him to think bigger so we can cure cancer itself. And the cure for cancer is going to come from India, thanks to Venkat and his team. Gene-edited plants. Imagine if you could grow mango trees in the deserts of Rajasthan. Or if you had varieties of wheat that grew hardier and that didn't require as much water. They're coming. And this is another project I'm involved with, which is going to transform Indian agriculture. Gene-edited humans. My God, this is craziness. This is Silicon Valley's vanity, that they want to now improve their own children and so on. Let's not get started on this one, but they're coming. And so the craziness of what you saw in Jurassic Park. Yes, there's scientists working on resurrecting the woolly mammoth, and they're coming. Bionic enhancement. This is another Silicon Valley stupidity, that they want to now enhance themselves so that they have superhuman strength. This is for the rich. Forget it. You're not going to see these in India. In rural India, but bionic body parts are coming. And this is just the beginning. Much, much more. Rural worlds and holodecks. Imagine now if you can be in a village and be visiting Silicon Valley in virtual reality. Or why Silicon Valley? Why not go and visit Mars in virtual reality? In the next 5 years or so, these, just like smartphones have become affordable, these holodecks will, these virtual reality headsets will become affordable. And then 3D printed houses, electronics, household goods. Yes, we'll be able to redevelop entire villages using 3D technologies. In the next 5 to 10 years, it'll become inexpensive to do that, and we'll be able to provide housing for everyone that needs housing. In about a decade or so, this will happen. And then the next green revolution. I'm going to get back to this because this is something which is near and dear to my heart as well. We're bringing it to India. Unlimited, almost free clean energy. This is going to be transformative for rural India because many parts of it are cut off from, even though they have some power connections, it goes too often and it's too expensive. We're headed to an era of almost free clean energy. I'll talk more about it. Commercial space exploration. The good news is that India is now part of the global space race. The West is in awe of the fact that India is now launching spacecraft that will go to the moon and Mars. This is a history of technology. It took thousands of years to go from agriculture to pottery to the plow to mathematics. Now we're on this exponential path. Everything is happening very, 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 very fast. And the speed of innovation is is increasing. And it's not only computing. Our computers now being cheaper than supercomputers, our smartphones being cheaper than supercomputers, is everything that computing touches. AI, robotics, networks, synthetic biology, nanotechnology, you name it. And it's becoming cheaper, faster, and smaller and affordable, which means that innovators in the villages can be doing the same types of advanced technology development that we're doing here in Silicon Valley, because the cost of everything has dropped and the knowledge is now available on the internet. You can go to your smartphones and use them rather than for watching Bollywood movies. The children in the villages can now be learning about synthetic biology and learn how to edit crops to make them work better in your villages. This is all possible right now. We will be able to solve the grand challenges of humanity itself. When I teach my students over here, I have to teach them what poverty means. I have to teach them how children in the villages don't have energy, how disease is caused by waterborne viruses, and the water is dirty in most parts of the world. You don't have to teach this to you people. You know it, you live it. But this is one of the things I have to teach my students away, because we're cut off from all of this reality. And this is why I look to India to solve the problem of humanity, because you understand the problems. You know how to solve them with technology. So you will learn how to solve them with technology. Now, getting back to my friend Venkat and curing cancer, believe it or not, curing disease is a data problem. If we can now understand the correlations between our genome, our lifestyle, our habits, what the key components are of our genetics, the data is necessary. And this is something you should ask Venkat about, what he's doing to make this happen. But the cure for cancer very likely will come from India.
It does paint a very hopeful future for the rural India. So now if I may come to Amarjeet sir to begin the conversation here. So your illustrious career has been dedicated to driving social development, and your contribution to major initiatives like the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan and the National Rural Health Mission has been exemplary. And so while today we discuss the trends emerging for the society and economy, it's evident that one cannot realize the aspirations without considering the rural India. The opportunities that it possesses and the challenges it has. So, sir, you have also been, I was fortunate to read one of your articles where you have very prolifically written about how the India's deprived households can be partners in the growth and well-being. So, I just wanted if you could share some of your thoughts that how do you think that it is a possibility that they are not just beneficiary to development programs, but also partners in the process, and so as to ensure a harmonious future for all of us. Over to you. So 5 to 7 minutes. Yeah.
Thank you, friends. It's a pleasure to be here today for many reasons. Meeting a lot of old friends on the panel and in the audience. Vivek's presentation made me think a little, because I have been a great believer that technology is a means and not an end in itself, especially when it comes to lives and livelihoods of deprived households. I'll illustrate my point as I go along, why I am saying it, and why, while the potential is there, unless the hand-holding, unless the community connect, unless the last mile is well thought through, there are challenges. Friends, yes, the fact that between 2005-06 and 2019-21, multi-dimensional poverty came down significantly, 415 million persons coming out of multi-dimensional poverty, as reported by the UNDP 2023 and 2022 reports. We also have to factor that this covers the 19 to 21 NFHS 5, and the subsequent COVID-related challenges could have diluted some of our where we had reached, because of the fragility of coming out of multi-dimensional poverty. I'd like to explain as I move on. It's remarkable that this transformation has happened, but it is also a little, so it's a question of the glass half full. Why do I say that it's a glass half full? If you look at the periodic labor survey, PLFS, the last one, it is actually reporting a larger number working in agriculture. But that, to me, my mind, needs a little more thought. Because obviously, if you're in an underemployed sector, you're likely to be doing it in the absence of other options. And it's important to understand this because even if you look at the PLFS in terms of the wages, the earnings, while the price survey, which Rajesh Shukla and his friends have done, they have pointed out about 30% population, 5 lakh to 30 lakh bracket, what he calls the middle class, and how it is enlarging. The PLFS assessments are a little different, but perhaps the truth may be in between. The fact that yes, chronic poverty is much less than what it used to be, but we have a long way to go because a large number of households are actually just above that line. When you start analyzing why is that the case, let me begin with something we have always said all the while, the importance of human capital and human development. But it shows most starkly if you try to plot a simple thing like universal primary education for girls. When did Japan achieve it? When did South Korea achieve it? When did China achieve it? When did India achieve it? At the turn of the 20th century, Japan had been able to provide for universal primary education for all girls. Till 1930, South Korea, China, India were around the same position, 30-35. But South Korea chose to reach that stage in the mid-60s, China in the mid-80s, and we have actually done it at the turn of the 21st century. And look at the economic profiles of the nations. There is nothing more stark than this. Within our own country, often we remark that southern Indian states report far lower levels of multidimensional poverty than many northern Indian states. The Niti Aayog data has also come up recently. Kerala reports 0.55% households in multidimensional poverty. Tamil Nadu reports 2.4% in multidimensional poverty. States with similar levels of economic activity, if you compare, say, Kerala with Haryana, population is similar, about 3 crores. Per capita income, Kerala at 2,14,000, Haryana higher at 276. But multidimensional poverty, Kerala is 0.55%, Haryana is 7.7%. Why? Female literacy, Kerala 95.5%, Haryana 77%, 73%, Punjab at 78%. So look at the linkages, they are very stark and direct. When you look at southern Indian states, I find, again, I think academia is so specialized now that very many of them have dropped the idea of multidisciplinarity. If you look at southern Indian states and why they report lesser incidence of poverty, I find 6 factors stand out. And that's, again, it shows the way forward. 1, adolescent girls in secondary, higher secondary and higher education, much before in other parts of the country. Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Andhra, Telangana, Karnataka. And how that initial secondary and higher secondary participation, first and foremost, leads to a decline in fertility. When collectives of women, young adolescent women, go for higher education, go for higher secondary school education, they go in collectives of women. And that is the first independent identity for many of them. Nobody is daughter, nobody is wife, nobody is sister, a woman unto her own. When they are educated up to higher secondary, avenues for polytechnics, ITI, nursing colleges, nursing schools, A&M schools open up for them. When your maternal and child health facilities improve, you are able to have more time for work than you would otherwise have had. And last but not the least, the provision for collateral-free lending to self-help groups of up to 10 lakhs without any completely collateral-free lending, no mortgages. It's raised now to 20 lakhs. Dr. Rangarajan introduced it 30 years ago through an RBI circular. Today, more than in the last 10 years, 6.7 lakh crores have been borrowed by these women from banks. And if you look at the NPAs, it is less than 2%, 1.8%. Yes, there is still long way to go. 6.7 lakh crores would actually be about 10 times that amount. That is the requirement need for credit. And clearly, if you want transformation, credit is important. So, women-led development and collectives of women making a difference, Southern Indian states clearly bring that point forward, and it explains many things thereafter. Likewise, what is it that creates hope today? The hope comes from the fact that Bihar, Jharkhand, Odisha, West Bengal, Assam, all these states also, almost in every village, women's collectives are very active today. Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh is also fast moving towards saturation of those programs. The Jivika Didi in Bihar is a reality across the state. Now, if these things happen, and that is the reason why even when you look at the decline in fertility, we reached replacement level before we had expected. It is not so much a function of good health care as it is of participation of adolescent girls in secondary completion. If you look at Odisha, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, 2010 to 15, most of them have secondary participation from adolescent girls. My own home state of Bihar, it was a 36-64 ratio till 2009 at the secondary level. It's almost 50-50 now, boys and girls. So friends, clearly human capital does matter. So one of these areas, this positive is the collectives of women have made things move much faster, and that is where hope lies. As civil society representatives here, many of you, and when I was looking through this book of Tribe, women's collectives and wherever panchayats, women's collectives, all of them come together, credit is available, enterprise is encouraged, you see the results. The low levels of poverty across many parts of southern Indian states, I can show you in Jharkhand, Bihar, Odisha, Madhya Pradesh as well, where they have gone through the same 6 processes that I mentioned. So there is hope of moving forward. Technology is a great enabler. The digital public infrastructure makes that major difference, which would not have been possible otherwise. And what is that difference? The IT DBT and the consequence of it, the fact that people can receive monies in their accounts, whether they're constructing a house, they're doing a toilet or whatever it is, or receive their loans. Now, digital public infrastructure as a payment system has moved many steps forward. But for it to emerge as a credit provision providing system, it needs more care. Otherwise, we may well have a lot of fly-by-night operators. People not knowing what the liabilities are going to be and putting in money there. So clearly, digital public infrastructure has to be accompanied with a lot of hand-holding, clarity of regulations. I worked with as the chairman of the gender committee of the Reserve Bank Innovation Hub, and we've been trying to use technology more effectively and efficiently to be able to spread credit at a much faster pace. With the collectives of women, so clearly this is the positive bit. Diversification is happening. Demography is on our side. But for that demography to turn around, unless we invest in that human capital, we may well become old before we become rich. And from that perspective, we need more work on this. Hope lies in the fact that women's collectives are there. Hope lies in the fact that 42% of the elected panchayat leaders are already women. And a large number of them have come out of the movement of the livelihood. It's true. Anjani Kocher's Stanford University study on the NRLM clearly brings out the fact that it takes 6 to 8 years for a women's collective to mature. Fair enough, it will take a little while. We'll have to have the patience for it. But this is the way forward. Human capital is the other one. The challenge, again, about incomes, employment, we will have besides human capital. So clearly in our journeys, if services is where the opportunities are, we have to move towards higher order skilling. we have to move towards higher order employment. We have to move towards employment where wages are much higher than what they are currently. So, unless and until, because manufacturing, while efforts are going on, it might take a little. And again, when you look at these states that I mentioned, why is it that private investment goes to Tamil Nadu, goes to Andhra Pradesh, Hyderabad, Telangana, goes to Gujarat, goes to a few other places? It's not only public infrastructure. A certain availability of human capital is also an important consideration. Why else will I make an investment? You will may give me the infrastructure, you may give me other facilities, but if I don't have the human capital, in many cases, this has been a challenge. So, when you have Shri near Chennai, the entire industrial estate fills up in no time. Everybody wants to come there. But it will not happen in Bihar and other places. So, clearly, human capital does come in the way. So, there we are we are well placed. The Women's Collective is one. Decentralized institutions of panchayats and others, and the changing character of that leadership is the other. The third is the digital public infrastructure, which is a big positive. Again, as I said, we need to do much more on incomes, on employment, on human capital to be able to move at the pace that technology would like to drive us, that we will be in a position to make better use of it. I think broadly these are the remarks I'd like to make at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It seemed like you were summarizing the entire session because you did touch upon the cross-cutting issues of gender, technology, and obviously you delved much beyond the rural-urban divide, and you did touch upon how gender equity can uplift not just a woman but the society in itself. So, moving to Venkat now. Venkat, you have an extensive experience with the Tata Group. At one point, you were leading the Tata Trust and driving significant developmental projects across various sectors. So, you have first-hand witnessed, the transformative trends on particularly on India's rural development sector landscape. So, with this and with your current role with the Karkinos venture, if you could tell us about. Of course, one knows that rural India does lack access to quality healthcare facilities. And do you think that the advancement of technology and other innovative practices? What are some of the trends, and where do you see that there is a possibility to bridge that divide between or the gap between the urban and rural communities?
Thank you, and it's a great pleasure and honor to be here in the midst of extremely inspirational people. Vijay, Sinha sahab, rarely seen him in such relaxed manner, because always whenever we used to have a chance to meet him in ministries, he was hassled or held for 20 different time and attention from 30 different people. I would start off with a bit of disclaimer. In the initial introduction about the genesis of TRI, I was one of the 3 or 4 people who were on that tour in remote Gumla. And this morning I was just as a preparatory note watching those photographs, which your phone had taken almost a decade or so ago. We were not any rich industrialists or any great philanthropists. We were representing our organization on quote-unquote a field trip, which people at Pradhan or many organizations used to give us a dog and pony show, is what we used to call. This was one degree of unbridled freedom that one got to actually ascertain as to what the heck was happening. And many of those comments made almost a decade ago are relevant even today. And the aspirations of people, if we are not able to ride on those particular trends, we are kind of completely redundant and if not completely irrelevant. And the smartphones or phones that existed 10 years ago have got a lot more sophisticated today. And the extent of information asymmetry which many organizations used to thrive say, by virtue of quote unquote sector professionals or development experts or foundations. We often underestimate the power of a rural woman who has access to education, access to knowledge. And today we're literally, every single town or panchayat has its own television station as well, or a radio station as well. So we don't need to go and convey as to what we know and what they need to know. They themselves have their own ways of figuring out what their life is. So long as we don't stand in the way and be their facilitator and or a participant, and also be a keen observer and be humbler in our own approach to things, we would sort of. Coming specific to healthcare, taking forward what Sinha mentioned about some of the southern states and where we are with respect to the central, eastern and northeastern. I'll just stick to the domain familiarity which we are currently associated with in case of oncology. When we look at capacity of cancer centers in the country, a couple of months ago there was a report of Frost and Sullivan which indicated that out of 740 or 741 districts, we don't know how many districts, many states are breaking up districts and calling them new ones, but 740 odd, which they said. 175 of them have access to cancer centers, which they say are quote unquote having access to radiotherapy equipment. Out of this 175, 60% of the capacity is in West and South. That's where we are, and these trends we see literally in every single development milestone as well, on industrialization to the other healthcare infrastructure as well. In some of the other healthcare infrastructure, the public health infrastructure in states like Kerala and or Tamil Nadu, in many ways is far superior to what you would see even in the private sector health infrastructure in places in central, eastern and northeastern India. That's a reality. Quality of personnel to people, the caregivers who are existing as part of the system, and it also significantly comes in by decades of empowerment, especially to women, which they have given over the years. So we should not underestimate that particular point. At the same time, what those states took perhaps decades to achieve it in this era of technology obliterating the extent of information asymmetry that existed, we can literally leapfrog a generation. And we were on a trip to Lucknow recently. One was pleasantly surprised as to what Lucknow was 10 or 15 years ago to what it is today. Literally 4 or 5 lane highways. The Jaguar Land Rover showroom in Lucknow was selling more cars than what you would otherwise see in Bombay, and which is quite fascinating. And the dealers don't get enough stock of vehicles for them to sell. And from the healthcare perspective, Medanta's own hospital in Lucknow is today a lot more thriving and profitable than many of the other Medanta hospitals than you see elsewhere. So these are some extremely emerging realities which we sitting in probably Delhi or Bombay cannot fathom to that extent as to what is changing at the grassroots. At the same time, much of our own awareness about healthcare is still, I would say, both on infrastructure and perception is still primitive. We are stuck in infrastructure which in many ways was an industrial era legacy of an infectious diseases type of setup, where much of the facilities were all based on accident, emergency, ICU, ICCU, people running around, as the case might be. But going forward, much of the diseases will be chronic diseases, which is your diabetes, hypertension, COPD, and several forms of cancer, where if we are able to somehow bridge the extent of information asymmetry that might exist, we can address many of them like more maintenance and management protocol rather than as a cure and care protocol. We can just take a couple of examples, like say in people in South Bombay, a girl child in the age group of 9 to 13 has as part of the vaccination protocol HPV vaccine embedded in that particular thing. From South Bombay, we go to Bandra or Andheri. That doesn't exist in the what you call immunization schedule of a particular individual. And many, even in several parts of the country, we just don't even think that it is needed. The country has finally introduced the vaccination program for HPV, but that's only applicable to 4 states in select districts. But what about the rest of the country? And cancers relating to human papillomavirus are completely preventable and curable 100% if detected early. Similarly, any woman who has not been vaccinated in her childhood, if crossed the age of 25, should get tested. We normally go to a healthcare facility when we are ill, not when we are well. So the mindset of all of us that this morning Anirban and I were chatting about, that we are all emperors who assume that we'll live forever and we have conquered mortality. So whether we like it or not, we are all a combination of DNA, RNA expressing itself into proteins, which breaks down further into sugars and amino acids. As and when our life and lifestyle is the way that we are, we will, if certain traits or characteristics exist, this is going to happen. And this is more starkly given in COVID as well. Whether you are a Xi Jinping or a Trump, if the virus exists, it will come and affect you. You can't do a nakabandi for preventing COVID. It doesn't work that way. So when we look at health systems of tomorrow, our own learnings can be by virtue of, we don't need to invent or recreate everything as to, unless we do it, and that too in our own way, it will work. We can take the learnings of what has happened elsewhere, adapt it to our own environment, and then see as to what can we do with a degree of repeatability, replicability, and scalability. And many of those things, we can do it as India first and world next, as what we have seen from digital public goods infrastructure, as what even Vijay and Aavishkaar have done many years ago on financial inclusion in a not much of a digital first infrastructure that exists today, but in many ways they are well ahead of their time as what it is today. The same kind of transformation is indeed possible in healthcare, provided we don't get into, as Sinha was mentioning, too much of a super specialized approach. So healthcare also needs a multi-dimensional approach. Somebody cannot say, look, my area of specialization is left nose, I won't see the right nose, even though it's bleeding. You go and see someone else. It doesn't work that way. So when we talk about health systems transformation, it is not a one-size-fits-all approach for many of our own people and our participants. We really need to be the customer engagement manager, relationship manager equivalent with the communities, and have whatever issue they might be facing and find a way to solve the problem, not say, I'm in livelihoods, water and sanitation, you go to someone else, it just doesn't work. So we would need to attempt to take a multidimensional approach to healthcare as well. And this has a direct impact, obviously, on life, but in many cases, a significant impact on livelihoods. At the same time, is a massive poverty, what you call inducing factor. So one chronic disease, debilitating factor. Of course, we have now Aavishkaar and many schemes coming in, but that's just not enough. It just puts things like cancer, not only you die, you put your family also in perpetual penury because of lack of early detection and getting the diagnostics right in the first place. But the good part is many of these are completely preventable and indeed solvable. So we don't need to worry too much about it. And Dr. G. K. the former chief of AIMS, used to say that cancer is a fantastic disease. That's why 50% of cancers are preventable and 50% of the rest of the 50, if detected earlier, completely treatable. You find no such disease having those particular characteristics, except that we don't know. Unfortunately, willpower is more powerful than willpower. If you completely smoke, obviously you will get lung cancer at some point of time in your journey. And except we think we are immortal and we don't. In fact, telling sir also some time back, India's largest insurance company owns majority stock in a tobacco company, which is ITC and LIC, which doesn't work in any other geography. So some of these structural changes we will need to call the bluff and convey, look, we can't have dual standards for healthcare. We would need to look at and take a lot more holistic approach. And this is literally everyone's responsibility, not ours alone. And that too for chronic diseases, which are quite latent in us, will not manifest as a morphological expression, which we historically have been used to in reading. Unless I see it with my own eyes, I won't believe. When we go into microorganisms, much of it is like an operating system. We don't see it, we only experience it when we get hit by it with that degree of severity. So, in that sense, one would urge many of the practitioners to be conscious of some of these emerging trends which are likely to hit us at a much more rapid pace than we think. Because in the absence of it, things like cancer, it's a very dubious distinction for us. Globally, we are number one or number two for most forms of cancer. And for oral cancer, thanks to consumption of tobacco, in whichever form, we are 40% of the global burden. This is not a distinction that we would like to have. And the other fact is, again, we can learn from experiences of others. And in many cases, some of the cancers like cervical cancer, many countries are on the verge of elimination. Australia will eliminate it by 2027. In the UK, if you cross 25, the NHS sends you a kit to your person's home and you have 2 appointments to fix it, and if you don't attend your appointment, you get an additional premium getting deducted by what it is. So therefore, the entire community comes together as their responsibility and not one individual alone. So in the collectives of the Jivika Didi or the SAG movements that we have unleashed for primarily livelihood interventions, can we use that same network of women's collectives to ride and drive some of those fundamental societal changes which are probably more behavioral than medical? I'll tell you, it took me almost 8 months to convince my wife to go for a health checkup. It was not easy. Of course, you can say if you convince your wife, you can convince anyone. That's a separate story. Just as Neeraj bought 2 weeks of insurance by conveying what he did. So I would say in that sense, rather than treating it as an independent activity of a rural development or a Panchayat Raj initiative or a livelihood or a Jivika initiative, can we take this approach as well of trying to trigger those behavioral aspects of health, especially for chronic diseases, and try to look at some of these fundamental tectonic shifts which are going to hit us. Thank you.
And, for me, I think the way you described it is that for an issue like healthcare, the needs that emerges, it is not just on the onus of private sector and the public, the government services to flow in, but also community taking in charge of the behavioral practices is what I think is a key takeaway from me from this opening remarks of yours. So now I'll come to Vijay. Vijay, your journey in rural development has been truly inspirational, with significant contribution in empowering marginalized communities in the rural India. So while today we navigate in this session, it is also evident that the rural India is at the cusp or at the center of this transformative changes. Amarjeet sir did touch upon the labor force participation rate currently, and also the demographic dividend that we have. So how do you see the rural economy evolving given the conditions of the high rural youth population and aspiring tech savvy youth population, and also agriculture, despite continuing to dominate the large chunk of rural economy, we still see marginalization and further landholding sizes being decreased over the period of time. So over to you.
Thank you. First of all, it is delightful to be here. I think here I am beginning to live up to the first word in its name, transform. Because we transform first and foremost in our heads. If we we think differently, we will behave differently, we will eventually build institutions differently, and we'll take all the things that Vivek talked about. As an engineer, there's no doubt in my mind that every one of those things and many more would eventually happen. As an engineer, there's no doubt in my mind that every one of those things and many more. I think he could.
Resounding echo of technology. What else?
So there's no doubt in my mind that those things will happen. Similarly, Amarjeet has had an incredibly, I've always envied his career. Imagine being Joint Secretary, Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, and then Joint Secretary NRHM, and then after that retiring as Secretary Rural Development. I would have, it's just the most amazing civil service career. So, but more importantly, he's lived during the era and seriously helped create those transformational changes. You heard about, the dramatic changes in secondary enrollment, and we'll see the impacts of all of that, including on female labor force participation rate in the next few years. It will unfold. The institutional infrastructure, particularly in the form of self-help groups and federations, there are about, I believe now 30,000 cluster federations around the country. Nearly smoothened access to bank credit and the digital payments infrastructure that again Amarjeet mentioned. For me, having been sort of involved with all these things in the very early stages when they were all fantasies, it's really it's a joy of my life to be here and say, "Ye to ho gaya." And at what scale? Not just millions, but tens of millions. So it's fantastic. But something doesn't get. Including, by the way, the latest MDI data. I don't want to quibble with methodology and the fact that there was a period issue and all of that. There's no doubt in my mind, there's visual evidence, anybody who goes through India, that there has been significant decline in poverty. And whether we take the starting date as 2015 or 2004 or 1992 or 1947, those are, I think, quibbles. But the secular trend is just amazing. There's no doubt. But even in this MDI report, you go and look at the number which deals with not the headcount numbers, but the intensity. The decline is relatively little. If I'm not wrong, it's from 44 to 41 or some such percent. So it's not as dramatic. And therefore, I think for people who are in multiple dimensions of that multidimensional poverty, life is still quite difficult, and that number multiplied by India's population base is still, over. It's in multiples of 100 million. I don't know whether it's 300 million anymore or 200, because we get into the whole issue of measurement. So the question is, we still have that problem left a lot, and we, more importantly, a lot of these things that have happened have all said and done created a beneficiary mentality at a very large scale in our nation. We become a nation of beneficiaries. we are not a nation of citizens, not yet. You know, the fact that 80 crore people got subsidized rations out of 140 crore people, nearly free rations. At one level, we can be proud of the fact that at least some help was given by the state and society, and that collectively we had the resources to create that kind of a transfer payment in the form of rain. But, you know, it also shows that there's tremendous degree of lack of agency and helplessness. And as Amarjeet mentioned in passing, that, you know, technology is only part of the solution. There's the last mile issue. And, you know, Ravi Mathai, the founder and director of IIM, he used to talk about creating a demand system. And I think we can do all this work, the technology work, the institutional work, the supply chain work, the digitizing everything. But all these are supply side solutions. And the demand side solutions, the only thing that I think that has been done, and once again, credit goes to Shri and all that, is significant enhancement in education, particularly in female education. Because that then creates the sense of individual agency, which is the building block of demand. But we should not again make the mistake there that an individual empowered is equal to a community empowered. There's a difference between individual human capital and social capital. You know, and that is a huge gap right now. In fact, if anything, as a nation, I think we've regressed. If there was a way to rigorously measure social capital, and I haven't come across any, but I suspect we've regressed in social capital. You know, the traditional social capital that we had, based in our Samaj, whether it was Jati Samaj or Gaon Samaj or whatever neighborhoods, whatever communities, that has declined significantly. And nothing else has replaced it adequately. You know, so to me, the explanation for why this doesn't gel comes from the fact that two of the 5 types of capital, that is, you know, the 5 are natural, human, social, physical, and financial. The 2 that we've emphasized in the 20th century are basically physical capital and towards the end, financial capital. You know, and financial capital has become so dominant that we now, whenever we think of capital, we only talk of finance as if that's the only form of capital. Whereas the primary source of capital is actually nature. I mean, nature pre-existed human beings also. And then when human capital is applied onto natural capital, which is nothing but a restatement of Marx's labor theory of value, but when you apply human capital to natural capital, that's how you create wealth. But that wealth additionality does not go very far in the absence of social capital, because that creates the basic mechanisms of trust, of collaboration, of mutuality, you know, and which are all the building blocks of institutions. And those are the ones which then eventually unleash dramatic progress. And I suspect that the crisis that we're facing right now is an unbalanced development of financial and physical capital, reasonable improvement on human capital, particularly in the last 2 decades, but at serious cost to natural and social capital. You know, we have really eaten up our environmental capital. You know, Jal Jangal Zameen, the Trustee over here. in this quest for growth and urbanization and all that, and ultimately progress is a human process. It's not, and we are not just a bunch of DNA molecules. We are, yes, but that's such a sort of molecular view of life, and by the way, when I was in IIT fourth year, while studying communication theory, I came across the genetic code for the first time and fell in love with it. To the point where I actually applied to JNU for a master's in biotechnology. They didn't take me because they said, "The biology school mein bhi nahi ki." But so I really love DNA. Nothing against it, But the human and beyond human, the social phenomenon. See, there's something about the sigma that is more than the sum. So just as human beings are more than, our body is more than sum of our parts, we are more than the molecules that make our body. Similarly, human society is more than individuals, right? So that aggregation process is what I think distinguishes a society from being an also-ran versus a great society. And we may have a 5 trillion economy, but unless we fix our environmental capital, natural capital, and our social capital, we may not be a society worth living in. So thoda soch lene ka about all these things. And these are not, sadly, tech problems. These are problems which go beyond tech. And all these lovely things, I'd love to have a robotic maid to clean the dishes and all of that. But, it's very different from what do you do about loneliness. In the same picture, there was also the robotic companion. And I think we are crossing the boundary line of comprehension there of what human beings are all about. So I want to leave this, I know I'm sort of going away from the the trends that you're talking about, but I remain very optimistic about rural India. And I, in fact, predict that there's going to be a serious return of, human capital to rural India because of the fact that our so-called smart cities are actually unlivable. Take Delhi, for example. Several months or a year, you can't breathe here. What a smart city. So, forget about anything. Let's just deal with this one thing. And Beijing and Delhi, two of the world's largest cities, of the world's most populous nations, they find it hard to breathe for maybe 50, 60, 100 days a year. We call this smart. Wow. So people are voting with their feet. They are going away from the metropolitan monstrosities. But along with that, thanks to the phenomenal gains in telecom, they are taking with them their human capital and their linkages with the world of financial capital. And I think that, for example, the thing that Vineet has recently set up, the Aavishkaar Foundation in Eastern UP, a day will come when lots and lots of people who are today living subhuman lives in, Borivali and beyond, would go back and become actually beacons of progress in, Devariya or in Gorakhpur or smaller places and so forth. And with them, they would have brought a lot of things, just as NRIs brought a lot of good things back to India. knowledge capital linkages. So that added to the institutional framework, these SHGs, etc., these together, to me, give the building blocks of the new possible transformation in rural India using human elements. The tech and other elements, of course, should remain. But the story ultimately has to be painted in human terms, and these two are I think, the reasons to be very optimistic. But, and I want to end with just another 30 seconds. All this is not going to happen unless we seriously and urgently fix these two neglects of environmental or natural capital, Jal Jangal Zameen, and our social capital. The first one is easy to fix. All of us in this room know lots of techniques. We've worked in thousands of projects with a little bit of investment, no more than maybe 25,000 rupees per hectare on an average. We can turn around Jal Jangal Zameen in between 3 to 5 years. No problems. Social capital, अब उनको अभी समझ में नहीं आ रहा है क्या करना है. Thank you.
Thank you, Vijay, and lovely way to summarize that trends are only means and not the ends, but rather the centrality lies in human beings themselves. So moving to Vineet, Vineet, your contributions in the world of impact investing have been commendable, and your focus on building a comprehensive ecosystem for this transformative approach is really inspiring for all of us here in the room. So because we are sort of we did hear on the trends of economy, we heard about technology, we heard about healthcare, and we also had cross-cutting the themes around gender. So how do you see any convergence of these trends along with impact investing, and do you think it will create meaningful opportunities for rural India going ahead? Over to you.
Namaskar, and I think still morning. Good morning. I think I'm very honored to be here with Mr. Sinha, but more importantly, my mentor, Vijay Mahajan. Well, I claim that he's my mentor, but I think there are 10,000 others who also claim that he's their mentor. So, but I make an extra claim in front of him. Tormentor to my mentor. So I am a forester, like Anish. We went to an institute called Institute of Forest Management, did a degree called PGDS. A lot of people may not know about it, but I think now to get into IFM, you have to go through CAT. And for a very long period of time, I used to think CAT is Billy. And my colleagues, including Anish, who went through many CATs, used to talk, say, "Bloody CAT, I couldn't get through CAT." And I used to wonder why. So that was the level of my naivete and ignorance when I was in IFM. Now, the interesting part that I have understood is those guys who get into IFM through CAT actually is somewhere in 80 percentile, so certified mediocres. Anish is not, but I am actually a certified mediocre. And one of the powers that PGDFM offers, or IFM offers you with this certificate of mediocrity is allowing you to be naive and very stupid. So that's one of the powers I have continued. So once I passed out, I was sent to the right place in a forest in Odisha. And I spent 4 years in that forest. And to be honest, I was born and brought up largely in Jodhpur, Jaipur. So not necessarily that I was in Bombay, etc. But even in those places, I didn't come across the poverty that I saw in Odisha in the forest. And the other interesting thing that I came across when I was interacting with these very poor people, that the factor that you think in cities, that poor beg, that begging doesn't happen. So it was quite surprising to me. And the third thing I did is, I used to ask all these people, what do you want to be? And invariably the answer was they wanted to be rich. But anyway, I was brought up saying poor are great people and rich are bad people. And here this was a completely confusing theorem where every good person wanted to become bad. They all wanted to become rich. So my quest started with this whole idea, how do you make poor people rich? And see, I was a forester, so, And I met Vijay Mahajan in 1999, I think, 1999. Asked him the same question. I actually told him I want to set up a fund to nurture the ideas that may help poor people become rich. And I'll define rich. Rich to me is when the day you have the ability to make choices, you become rich. So if you have the choice to eat 2 square meals a day, it doesn't need to be dim sums, it could be anything. Then you become rich. You have a roof over your head, you become rich. You have a choice to send your children to school, you become rich. So I'm defining riches not by yachts and airplanes, private capital, but by the right of choices. I'll also take you back to 2000. You must have all heard about bottom of pyramid, but as we stand today, I'll split that bottom of pyramid in 2 parts. The first, I think a cliched statement I'll make, the pyramid of aspiration has become flat. So while we used to talk about the pyramid of aspiration is flat. So we heard that in different forms and manners, everybody's saying it. But today, a 15-year-old son of a very rich person and a very poor son, a poor person's son in a very remote village, have the same dreams. For a very long period of time, the aspiration and dreams of poor were very different from the aspirations and dreams of rich. Not anymore. Now, there are consequences to having this aspiration, and that comes from the second pyramid, which is the pyramid of resource. Unfortunately, the pyramid of resource still exists. And pyramid of resource actually then creates all kinds of confusions. I'll just give you a very bland statistic that on one side, we think there is lack of jobs creation in rural economy. On the other side, microfinance institutions have 50% attrition rate at the CSR level. And the CSRs are 10th, 11th and 12th pass guys from the villages actually getting 20,000 or 25,000 rupees as salary, leaving their jobs in droves. And I'm talking about lakhs of employees actually. The entire microfinance institution pretty much get reinvented every 24 to 36 months. Can you believe it? So, wow, what actually explains, if there are no jobs, what explains people leaving? And it's quite a quandary. And no microfinance institution with some of the best resources at their hand have been able to figure out why it happens. And there were many reasons to it, I won't go into them. But I'm just telling you, the kinds of feedback that you get from the field confuses you a lot, especially to somebody who's as mediocre as me. So I think, how do you actually respond to this aspiration? And one of the ways probably I can think of is there are 2 ways you can look at. One is technology, and what technology does, it allows you to actually leapfrog common challenges. Some of those things have been discussed. But there are some others that I'll actually talk about as we go. The other part is capital, and I'm actually talking about financial capital. Financial capital is a necessary condition, may not be the sufficient condition, but necessary condition to allow you to use technology to leapfrog ordinary problems. And I think this is where the whole idea of impact investing actually comes into play. So what does impact investing do? So let me start by making another statement. All investments make impact. So when you invest to build a road, you make a significant impact. But impact investing and investing are 2 different things. And it starts from the motivation. So impact investing is when you start with a claim that you're going to deliver an impact. It ends when you actually prove, not necessarily prove actually, when you disclose what you did. It's not necessarily that you have to deliver the impact that you claimed, but you at least have the courage to disclose it. Now these 2 things differentiate between investing and impact investing. And it is important to keep this in mind. I'll take you through an example. I think the gentleman I'm talking about is probably going to be speaking in the afternoon. But so I met these 2 young guys in Samastipur in Bihar, and they had a very simple problem that they were solving. They said, "You look around, यहाँ पे सारों तरफ गेहूं है, पर किसी farmer के पास पैसा नहीं है." Samastipur is actually a wheat belt. And I want to create a grain bank. मैंने कहा बैंक तो बहुत सारे हैं, what is a grain bank? He said कि सर ये grain को जो है मैं convert कर दूंगा into a digital currency. Now these 2 guys are actually not necessarily from any IIT, IIM, etc. Both from Samastipur. And so I said, I tried, so इसमें बैंक क्या हुआ? Long story short, the idea was as simple that there is no storage place for the grains. Storage normally is done, the warehousing policy is designed more for traders rather than for the farmers, because the quantum that is needed, normally a single farmer will not produce, so ultimately traders use it. How do you actually create a bank branch which actually resides within the village, allows the farmer to store the grain, but I use technology to convert the grain the moment it arrives into a digital currency, and I give a passbook to the farmer, and then instantly also credit his account to 70% of the amount value of the grain, and then keep giving him on a daily basis a right to sell or trade forward. And I will also give him the right to trade in 1 bag, 5 bags, 10 bags, 20 bags. Which means whatever number you want to trade, you don't need to sell everything at one go. You can sell in tranches. In doing so, I should be able to enhance the farmer's income by 1.3 to 1.7 times in 6 months. Now, so I thought about it, and then I gave them 3 crores, which I knew they will burn, which they exactly did. So they ate away that 3 crores in another 12 months. We gave them another 3 crores, which also they burned. We gave them another 2 crores, they burned. But to cut the story short, this company has just cost 250 crores in revenue. Came out of Bihar, anybody can go and visit. It's known as Argos. I don't know why Argos. They could have come up with a better name, which is local, but this is actually a story of ingenuity and what impact investing can do by taking extraordinary risks with great ideas of people. And then I'll try to connect this with sustainable development goals. So sustainable development goals, as most of you probably know, and I think all of us look down on politicians and bureaucracy, not in the thing to you. But I think sustainable development goals is a collective aspiration of the global leaders to see a world that has never existed before. And I think it has never existed since the time Homo sapiens started walking straight. A world without hunger, without poverty, without inequity. And I think probably the most laudable goals any civil society would want to have. And so this came up in 2015. In 2018, Paul Polman invited me to join into a commission called Business Commission for Better World. Better Business, Better World, and we wrote a report. One of the questions was, what is it that the world needs to meet that goal? Specifically, and I'm being very specific on financial terms, not on other terms. And our calculation suggests that we needed $2.5 trillion of investment every year, starting 2018 till 2030, for us to reach anywhere close to the goals that Sustainable Development Goals wanted to reach, which is a world without hunger, without poverty, without inequity. Now, 2.5 trillion is a lot of money, and so therefore it was quite surprising. So we started looking at what is the total global pool of capital, and that turned out to be 400 trillion. So you are roughly talking the world to sacrifice 0.5% of growth for this entire world to be free of hunger, poverty, inequity. Now that's really where the whole idea and power comes into being, as to what is it that human ingenuity can offer. Can human ingenuity come up with an idea that will allow the greedy folks in the world who control the 400 trillion to give up that 0.5%? And I think carbon credits as a mechanism offers you one chance of how Kyoto Protocol was able to convince people to transfer money by actually trading in thin air, pretty much. So what a beautiful idea. You raise money, you give it to poor people to grow trees, let them keep the tree, the fruit, and everything else, and trade in thin air, and allow the assets and the capital to stay with poor people. I mean, I don't think so there is any more ingenious idea or a magic formula I have come across than this. So do we have the capability in this room or outside to actually think about similar ideas that may convince this $400 trillion to give up 0.5%? I was also part of the drafting committee of Social Stock Exchange, which is struggling to come up with the same powerful idea. The concept is great. Again, as one of the authors, I can take take some credit, but at the same time, I also am very, very aware of the limitations. Maybe there is a time for us to think about an impact coin. If TRIF has to transform rural India, is there a way that we can actually create, using all the technologies that we heard Mr. Wadhwa talk about, create an impact coin that can be treated across the globe? Again, a discussion that I have been involved for quite some time. And finally, as my mentor said, it is no more going to be your legacy that you became a billionaire. In fact, long time back, actually 7, 8 years, 10 years back, I asked Vijay Mahajan, sir, what happens if you and Vinod Khosla walk into a tech conference? Who will get more claps? So he said, Vinod Khosla. Then I said, sir, what happens if Vinod Khosla and Vijay Mahajan walk into a microfinance conference? Who gets more claps? He said, Vinod Khosla. So I said, sir, what is the use of being Vijay Mahajan? अगर ताली दोनों टाइम विनोद खोसला को ही मिलनी है, what is the use of being Vijay Mahajan? But I think time has come for your legacy is not going to be being a billionaire. Your legacy will come from being the founder of an idea that will convince the world to give up greed and hopefully put in the trillions of dollars that is needed to make world a worthy place for us to live in. So we'll just stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for touching upon the issues of how, again, financial capital is necessary to be considered, but only it will enable many other things to leapfrog towards having this, achieving the sustainable SDGs that we have set out for ourselves. So I have been getting reminders on time limitations. So we won't be doing any Q&A because I think we are already lagging behind. But if you guys can just take 30 seconds to just give one hopeful statement about how can we make rural India more inclusive and harmonious and prosperous going ahead. So that will help me close this session.
You don't need to go beyond movies or politics. Normally, they are well ahead of our time in terms of both in imagination and delivery. Say 20 years ago, you had movies running for 100 days and then deciding whether it's a hit or a flop. Movies determine what was today, what was yesterday, Star Trek with Zoom and similar things happening as a reality today. So movies show a number of esoteric things as to what is at the cusp of reality. And even in terms of getting micro-granular data about individuals, and we may all claim our own intellectual prowess or superiority. The person who has the pulse of the people at the grassroots, which is the person dealing at a political level in terms of his understanding, he or she is far superior than what we think. If we take some of those elements in a positive way, not in some of the other, at times, extreme polarizations that you might often see or notice elsewhere. Say, if you, again, not getting into politics or sides of anything, the concept of a panna pramukh, where each individual is responsible for a page of an voter sheet. That is the extent of microgranular targeting which literally every single politician does today. Are we that granular today in terms of, we in the foundation used to ask, tell me your list of beneficiaries. We hardly used to get data to that granularity as to who they were and what they were doing literally on a real-time basis. Whereas literally today in every state, you see that Andhra Pradesh has made it a lot more sophisticated by using DBT. By press of a button, money goes straight. No power on earth can technically beat such kind of politics. Tamil Nadu office has been doing it for ages. But I think these are a couple of learnings, not taking the rough for these. Loyalty, if you take mafia, massive loyalty. There's no written contract, but the kind of loyalty that you see in mafia is literally to a different degree. Again, I'm saying, can we take those positive elements of some of those trends and apply it to rural development or the emerging mega trends that we see? Sorry for the long-winded.
Time for photo op. So rural India actually offers 3 photo ops. Photosynthetic, photovoltaic, and photogenic. Photosynthetic, of course, whole green world basically exists in rural India. And the rate smog is going to affect our cities, there will be no photosynthesis possible here. Photovoltaic, already, you heard from Vivek Wadhwa. In 5-10 years' time, nobody would want to draw energy from the grid. And it's going to happen. Two great opportunities. Photogenic, तो देखने वाली जगह बचेगी तो सिर्फ रूरल इंडिया में शहर तो हद से बदतर हो जाएगा. So I'm highly optimistic.
One sentence, I'll limit myself to just one sentence. I think social and human capital as the basis for a transformational economic growth and human well-being, which is environmentally sustainable and builds on the ingenuity of enterprise.
In 2001, the entire microfinance sector in India was 100 crores. And 2023, it's around 3,50,000 crores. If poor women who, and this includes poor women who are uneducated, coming from north and south, can build a $50 billion industry, and with Kurz Small Finance Bank listed, which is one of the banks that we supported, and straight away hit the upper circuit, it tells you the power that resides in rural India. So why are we so concerned about it? I mean, if they can build a $50 billion industry in 20 years, those women, if they were uneducated, imagine what they can do with educated.
So I can't, thank enough for all the panelists for bringing this different perspectives to the table today and for setting the context so well for the rural colloquy that begins today with this session. But however, it is as just to summarize from whatever I heard, from Vivek's video and from the panelists present here, this is only a start, and trends in itself won't transform into anything unless we bring in the whole of society approach where markets bring in innovations, government act as an enabler, while most importantly the rural communities drive the change. So with that, I would like to thank you everyone for the great participation, and I hope you all enjoyed the session as much as I did, and look forward to seeing you all in the remaining sessions of the rural colloquy.